Steve Ruark, thank you very much for coming in.
Jake. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Had some awesome guests. Appreciate being in the company of those folks.
Oh, yeah, well, I've seen you a lot around campus, and you used to take the photos for the lacrosse team a couple years ago, and that's when I first kind of interacted with you. So I've been meaning to have a sit-down conversation with you. It's just been so busy.
It has been. I'm finally catching a little groove here. I hope you are too.
Yeah, a little bit. This weekend will be nice. The nice Martin Luther King weekend.
Absolutely. We'll take an extra day.
Yeah, for sure. What's going on in the photography classes here at Gilman? What are you guys working on?
So, I'm teaching 2 sections of all freshmen, and so it's pretty cool, kind of clean slates. And we started out at the beginning of the year in the dark room and doing pinhole cameras and things, but now the guys have DSLR modern cameras in their hands, and actually I just posted on one of the display cases their first work that they did, and with their real cameras, and now we're just kind of stacking skills and getting a little more depth with modern cameras, and it's been pretty awesome to see what the guys are making, and it's like unbelievable that they just started this, so it's real fun.
So every freshman gets their own camera?
It's about 19 guys in the class, and we have cameras for every one of them. A few guys have their own cameras, or their families have cameras that they're using, but it's pretty awesome. Now, I was a student here at Gilman and took photography. It was a little different. You could go buy a manual Pentax with the lens I remember I got mine for $40. Nowadays, there are these digital computers more than cameras, and so it's pretty awesome to be at Gilman, a place that can do that, and get cameras in every one of these guys' hands. They don't have to trade them off, and they're theirs for the year.
So when you start out, what do you have to teach them in order for you to trust them with such an expensive and nice camera?
Yeah, well, we kind of give them to them before they know how to use them, but photography is pretty interesting in that it's a technical art. So you have this machine kind of between your mind and what you create, and you kind of have to learn how to use that machine and use your shutter speed and apertures, and it's probably a little intimidating when you first start hearing those words and figure out what it is. It's not as difficult as I think.
A lot of it's trial and error, probably.
It is. We have an exercise that we have them do that's it's probably, I almost feel like it's going to become an infamous thing where they've got to go out and demonstrate that they understand the technical side before we get them doing the creative stuff. That is a lot more fun. Mm-hmm. But they all do a couple redos and going back out and doing it again. But some trial and error, and I go out with them and show them, and then we kind of move past that and start, really being creative and making things.
Do you guys usually kind of walk the campus and find different things to shoot?
So we've had a couple of times where we do that. Earlier in the year when the power went out in the vicinity. We were still in the dark room, and we still need safe lights to work in the dark room. It can't be completely dark. So that was kind of our first foray, and they had not yet learned to use their cameras, but they all have cell phones, and it was our first time to kind of see what they could see with them. And we walked down to Stony Run and just kind of took a hike, and I gave them kind of a little mini assignment, and it was really cool just to see what they could do, and without kind of the technical side of things yet. And
that's nice
fun,
It's nice to have a class where you have a reason to go outside. My English class, I'm always looking for reasons to get them outside, walking around, just moving, because I feel like sitting in a classroom every single day for 3 periods for 80 minutes, or it kind of gets tiresome, and you want to move your. Like, I come up with my best, most creative ideas, I think, when I'm walking, when I'm moving my body. And I'm always looking for reasons to take my classes outside, whether it's a nice day or, some kind of conversation we're doing in class. But it's nice in your class. It feels like you always have a reason to go outside and explore.
Yeah, it's kind of gotten tough now that it's cold. We're, I think, a little more reluctant to go out there.
That's true.
I do try to push the boys to shoot outside of school as well. It's cool to see what they can create here, because it's kind of everyone has the same thing here, but how do they see it differently? What's important to them, kind of their world. But for instance, our last assignment, they had to turn in 10 photos, and I required that 5 of them were made outside so that they could also explore, their world outside of Gilman and then share that with us. So it's kind of funny. Something that I've recognized over the years is that so many jobs, careers have now kind of boiled down to the computer. I got into photography because it was cool to be out shooting, but it was also cool to be in the darkroom. But now it all kind of boils down to being in front of a computer, just like many other things. And I even noticed that as a photographer, photographing other people and what they do, I have to kind of get them away from the computer. Everything comes back to that. And it's a great tool. And we have an awesome pub lab that they work in. And a lot of our class is go out and shoot and then bring it into class, and we edit it and discuss it. And I'm there to help them with the technical side as well as just the artistic side. But yeah, we do try to get them out there, and sometimes it's a kind of part of the class. We'll just kind of the last half perhaps go out there and shoot. But yeah, it's fun to have that opportunity.
When you bring your photos in, do you usually use Photoshop to kind of change things?
So we're using Lightroom right now, which is part of that family. It's from Adobe and very similar. It's a little simpler, I think, for the guys, and I've even found in my own work I use it more often. I might even kind of like the results better unless you're doing some major manipulation, which we don't have them doing yet. It's kind of learning the basics before, I tell them they got to learn how to drive before they can get in a race car, and then we have an advanced course that Sarah Sachs is teaching, and they get a little more into that. And my background as a photojournalist, I don't do a lot of that kind of manipulation in Photoshop. I kind of use it more to just mimic the darkroom and what we could do in the darkroom, kind of as a general rule of thumb, so that what's being presented is reality. So I do give them the leeway to go beyond kind of what I've done. And in fact, this latest assignment that we just started with color, I gave them the license to tweak out their colors and go a little beyond reality. Because it'll be cool to kind of see their creativity. And I like it if they can do something that maybe it was not what I would have thought of. I want them to do that.
So I took a photography class in high school, I think maybe my freshman year, just an intro class. So I don't really know anything about photography other than...
Your freshman year in college, correct? Yeah.
High school.
Gotcha.
A long time ago. All I remember is rule of thirds.
Yeah, man. So that's one of our compositional elements. So they had an assignment. Their first assignment was 5 different compositional elements, and that was one of them.
How do you explain rule? Yeah. Like, why is that a concept in photography?
So I talked to them about this idea of aesthetics, and there is some science behind it, about which I'm certainly not an expert. The psychological side of that. But if you have your subject kind of smack dab in the middle of your picture, the viewer's eyes kind of go there and they get stuck there, where, if you put it off to the side and in the corners, the rule of thirds is kind of if you divide your frame up into kind of 9 quadrants, and you have those intersecting lines, and that you would want to kind of place your subject, somewhere along those intersections of those lines. Because the viewer kind of starts with that subject, but then it gives them room to kind of move around your frame and, explore a little bit more instead of getting locked in there. And I'm sure there's more to it psychologically.
What are some of those other kind of basic rules that you go over with the freshmen right away?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I do make it a point to tell them that these are rules, but they are certainly open to be broken. But you often have to learn the rules in order to learn how to break them effectively, is the way I kind of break it down for them. Because there's always exceptions in art. And I mean, really, I think perhaps the deans wouldn't agree, but even all rules, there are times where there are exceptions to those. And so that's kind of, we just have to build that foundation, and then it can be fun to see them break the rules effectively. And I just, make it clear then we want to be deliberate about doing that and kind of have purpose behind why we're going to break those rules. And I know the same thing applies with writing and things like that, So.
Yeah. I was actually talking to Davina. She's the Penn Fellow in the upper school, and I was telling her about how I've been reading Ernest Hemingway, A Movable Feast, right now, just kind of on my own for fun. But it's like Ernest Hemingway, one of his most famous autobiographical works set in Paris. And I wouldn't have said I was the biggest Hemingway fan like earlier, but I think he's very poetic, and I've been enjoying this book particularly. And it's funny. I was home for the winter break, and I have a younger sister in 6th grade, and she's not the strongest student right now. She doesn't love to read. She doesn't love to write, but she was writing a little essay, and she wanted me to go over it. And it was interesting how her sentences had the same, like they would have come out of a Hemingway.
Yeah, like cadence-wise, or like the words, or
Yeah, the structure of the sentences, they're brief, they're to the point, they evoke an image in your mind, right? And I was reading this celebrated American author, and my little sister in 6th grade writing something. It's interesting how like Hemingway and all great artists want to kind of return to that like childish stage of seeing something for the first time.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, kind of the novelty. They're making the familiar novel.
Yeah, and I was just kind of blown away because I would never have expected that to line up like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool with your sister, and sometimes, with my students, just what they do intuitively, without a whole, there's been some guidance already, but just from what they've absorbed in life, reading and seeing,
Right. And you probably see that a lot with the freshmen coming in, because some of them probably have never had experience with photography before. They've never learned all of these rules, but they still have that intuition at first.
Yeah, so, when I was a student, I took my first photography class here at Gilman. We weren't allowed to take it yet as a freshman. I believe I was a junior. And I bought I mentioned that Pentax camera. And I guess I had made a few pictures with some point-and-shoot cameras, but I hadn't made a lot of pictures in my life. Where these guys, we kind of give them a new machine with which to do it, but they've used their cell phones to make pictures, and they've seen so many more pictures themselves through just being bombarded, for better or worse, with imagery.
Yeah.
That at least some of this stuff kind of has gotten through to them through osmosis, and they recognize what they like and what kind of resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just exposed to so much more quickly, again, for better or worse.
Just scrolling through your Instagram feed or whatever it is, osmosis.
It's a great thing, but then it's also this thing we have to kind of fight against, of like making imagery stand out, and making it come out from this sea of pictures. But yeah, it's cool just that some of the things I'm talking to them about, it might not have been as concrete in their mind, but they kind of get it, and they say, oh yeah, I recognize that.
Now, when you started as a student in photography at Gilman, were you naturally inclined to like photography beforehand, or is that something you were taught, or did you have an eye for it kind of all through your childhood?
So it's funny, my parents think it's hilarious that I became a photographer, because they were the type of folks that would shoot rolls of film and stick it in the drawer and not have it developed for years. And, to the students now, that's such a foreign thing with the immediate gratification. But, it really wasn't something that they didn't have any fancy cameras or anything like that. I don't know, I just think somewhat on a whim just thought it was a cool thing to do, and took this class. And I remember kind of with my buddies at the lunch table, and still on a whim, you're like, I think photojournalism would be a cool thing to get into. And I really didn't know enough to really like make that commitment yet. And we all have ideas through life of what we might want to be, and I certainly had others. But it's amazing kind of how that stuck, and I just continued with it.
What'd you like the most about it when you were just getting? What attracted you to it?
I think that I do think creatively and a little bit outside the box in some ways, but I am an absolutely terrible drawer and painter, and kind of what's in my mind I cannot translate through my fingers. I did take art here, and in fact, Betsy Heisler, who recently passed away over COVID here, she had come in. She's a working artist, and she was so super cool. And I take her class, and I knew what I was creating wasn't necessarily amazing, but I started to kind of use it as a way to study composition and even light, and by kind of having it come through my hands, even if the results weren't so great, it was a different way to process it and see it. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of liked being in the art room, and it was fun. We could listen to music, and I even had my work study as a student. I know they've kind of changed the structure of that, but my work study was to go to the art room, and at the end of the day, I'd go and just clean paintbrushes, and it was pretty cool. It beat sitting in study hall, and
Yeah.
I could listen to music, and I just enjoyed kind of being in that environment. And I think the exploration of it all, particularly photography, gives you the opportunity to kind of explore the world.
Yeah.
I often joke that I don't know a lot about many things, but I know a little bit about a lot of things because I just kind of pop in and out of these worlds. So.
Yeah, going back to that point about like getting outside and moving the body and kind of learning through movement, I think that those classes, I've been in Mr. Connolly's classes before in photography, and even some of the units that I do in English where they're creating and they're writing their own stuff is so important, because not everyone learns from sitting there and just hearing someone talk, or reading, or kind of going through the slideshow. I think the exploration of these classes is so important, and I find that the at least for me, I'm somewhat of I wouldn't say I'm super creative, but I just enjoy those environments, and I think the time goes much faster when you're engaged in something that you yourself are creating, producing, and working in on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't lecture too much, but I do discuss things with these guys, and often when I'm done, I say, okay, guys, I could talk about this forever, but now we got to go do it.
Right.
And not to diminish my education, but as much as I sat in classrooms and studied, most of what I learned was through my experience and internships and just being out there doing it, kind of getting beyond the theory.
What kind of theory do you go over? What photographers do you use in your classes as kind of examples to try to follow or to try to emulate?
So it's interesting. I try to kind of guard against getting these guys too much into like my box. A lot of the photographers that I like to look at are from the journalism world and documentary. But here, this is part of the art department. It's a little broader in what we can do. So the guys, if they listen to this, might not love it, but soon they're going to have to choose a photographer of their own and do a short report about it and kind of adopt them as their own mentor. But I do enjoy a lot of journalists, some of the big time ones, but also there have been a lot of local guys and ladies as well, local photographers that have really been influential to me. But I do try to guard against that. In fact, yesterday in showing the students some pictures, a lot of them were kind of student photos, and I remember as a student myself, sometimes the examples that we would see, particularly in college, would be just from faraway lands and kind of things that weren't so accessible to me, and you're like, I can't do that, and to some degree maybe that was just young people making excuses, but I try to show them things that, hey, this is available to you. This was just a creative way of seeing everyday life, like we were kind of discussing earlier.
Yeah.
But there are certainly some folks that I plan on showing them.
Who are your favorite? Who are your favorite like all-time photographers that you really enjoy, respect their work?
The godfather of photojournalism is Henry Cartier-Bresson to me, and the decisive moment is kind of his phrase that he coined, and it still lives on today. And it's really about being a fly on the wall, and not interfering with the scene, and really kind of finding art in life rather than kind of creating it. And I've never been really great in the studio. I know how to use lights, and I can create to some degree, but going out there and just being a fly on the wall, and that's what I enjoy doing. And it's really awesome when you create a picture that tells a story and kind of applies to be used in newspapers or magazines, but yet it also is artistic and
Could stand on its own.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's always kind of been this battle sometimes between the art world and journalism, but it's found its way on gallery walls too, and particularly early on in photography, it's kind of the outlier. So even in this outlier world of art, photography's kind of its own outlier. And I don't know, in some ways I'm kind of a everyday kind of guy, but I kind of also enjoy that outlier guy.
I was I was looking at your website and all of the photos that are on there, and it seems like photography, it's taken you to some pretty cool environments and like historical moments.
It has. I mean, a lot of photography is kind of everyday things, making portraits of someone who may be featured in a story. But it's so cool, the different worlds that I get to visit, and my camera's kind of been my ticket in, whether it's kind of the high-end world of, politics and business and finance, or, also those folks that struggle in life and kind of having an opportunity to have conversations with them and be in their environment and let others see what's happening with that. So, I could one day be in the Legg Mason Tower and the next day be, in the west side of Baltimore, pretty tough streets. And
I know you've lived in different locations. So, are you from Syracuse,
No,
New York?
I grew up here in Baltimore, and I've spent most of my time here. I've had my little jaunts
Tennessee?
here and there. So when I graduated from Syracuse, I came back to Baltimore and interned that summer at the Sun. And then I started throwing my resume and portfolio out there. And I wanted to go somewhere and kind of have an adventure with it. So I went to Jackson, Tennessee, the bustling metropolis. And
What was that like there?
it was pretty cool. I was between Nashville and Memphis, and so it was neat. Like, I would go visit those places, and it was definitely different than being in Baltimore. I think it was about the size of Salisbury, and our newspaper was about that size. It was like a net-owned paper. We just had 3 of us on staff, so it was a pretty small staff. And so when big things happened, it wasn't like, well, the new guy's not going to do it. So they sent me out to spring training. We had Mark Pryor, had just gotten drafted by the Cubs, and he was on our AA team. And I guess maybe it was AAA. But anyway, he was like the $1 million guy on the team down there. So I went out just basically to cover him. The Olympic torch came through, and we got to do things like that. And it was pretty fun. I was just there for a couple of years, and I think after a while the novelty wore off, and I didn't think that was where I wanted to kind of live and start a family and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I left that job to temporarily freelance. It's almost the 20-year anniversary of that. I told my wife that last night, as a matter of fact. I moved back in 2002, and until I came here to Gilman, I was a 1099 employee for all 20 years there. So that temporary status kind of eventually, I said, this is how I'm going to do this.
So what's the freelance lifestyle like? Like, you wake up in the morning and you kind of just let your creativity take you where you want?
I very rarely went out and shot what we call on spec, where I was just making pictures and hoping that somebody was interested in them. Now, if I came across something of interest, I definitely shot it and would call some editors I knew. But often I kind of know what I'm up to. I get a call, hey, what are you doing on Tuesday? And that's kind of the way it still goes. And if I'm not here teaching at Gilman, I go out and shoot it. And they say, can you go cover this for us? So sometimes it's because it's a local publication and they just need an extra guy that day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's out-of-town publications, and rather than have staff everywhere, they give you a call and say, hey, this is in your backyard. And by backyard, it might be Delaware, Virginia, D.C., Maryland, pretty large backyard there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there have been some other things that have given me some opportunities to travel a little bit. I do also some commercial work, and so things have died down. COVID has kind of changed some
Staying
things.
local.
But I got to do some cool stuff with the NHL. It was more on the corporate side where I wasn't covering the game action so much, but a lot of the interactions with their corporate sponsors and things like that. But I got to go to a lot of the outdoor hockey games that they held at
Nice.
Notre Dame and Levi Stadium and Gillette and all that. And so that was pretty fun. That was cool stuff.
Yeah, I love some of the sports photography shots on just the ones that I've seen on your website.
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
really
cool.
enjoy that. And I do a lot of prep sports too. I do some of the pro and college stuff, but even before I was here as a teacher, I would pop into Gilman. You and I would see each other when I did the lacrosse stuff, but then sometimes I would come out and cover a game for the Sun, say. And that was just like a great way to spend an afternoon and get paid and make fun pictures. And it's a little easier to get in and out than when you go to M&T and have to deal with all the hoopla there. And the pictures are just as cool, to me anyway, even if it's not the Major League logo on the side of the helmet. In fact, you have more access. And it's, to me, my favorite sports pictures were often at like the state championships and the emotion of the athletes at the end.
Yeah.
I think sometimes a lot of action kind of blends in, and the picture of the quarterback dropping back are important if they're doing a story about whomever it may be, but they're not the ones that really rock to me. It's the high school athletes winning states, like that's a lot of fun.
For sure. Would you say sports events are your favorite atmospheres, environments to shoot?
It's interesting because that you're going to get these super emotions and these awesome moments even in the action, all kind of within this box. It's like this artificial, it's the original reality TV, right?
It is,
and I think that's why we enjoy watching them. So it is cool, but I don't know that it is. I think I enjoy kind of these other things, and some of them might not be perceived as big time. Often it's cool when I'm the only photographer at a situation with someone, and maybe it's illustrating like a larger issue or something. But those are the things that I kind of enjoy a little bit more. But I like it all. It's hard to pinpoint it all. But I didn't initially get into photography to do sports, but I definitely enjoy it, and it's part of the gig. And
when did you know you wanted to be a photographer? So you took that class at Gilman, and you were talking to your friends at the lunch table about like what it might be like. But when was the moment you're like, this is my calling, this is my passion, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life?
Yeah, so I took a class with Mrs. Louise Miller in junior year. It was called Photojournalism. It was loosely photojournalism. It was kind of just a framework within to learn photography. And then senior year, I took another class with Dean Weller here at Gilman. That was just photography, and I was in the photography club, and I really started to think I might be halfway decent at this. And I look back at what I was doing was fairly pedestrian. Frankly, what my guys are doing now like blows it away, and I pulled out some pictures and I'm like, wow.
Because you're teaching them all the tricks.
These guys really rock it. But through that, and I guess it wasn't in stone yet, but I really started to get more serious about it, and certainly through my teachers kind of saying, hey, you're pretty good at this, and putting my work up just like with these guys, I started to be interested in it. And then Eva Turner, who was the head of the upper school for a while here, I actually had taken an English class at Bryn Mawr with her right before she came over here my senior year to be a college counselor. And I told her that I wanted to study photojournalism, and I had a bunch of schools that on my list, but I really didn't know what I was talking about. I was kind of the first guy to go to college in my family, and so it wasn't like I was going to go to the school that my family went to or anything. And she was really instrumental in saying, hey, if you're serious about this, Syracuse is a place to check out. They have a strong journalism program, and they have the photography part of that too. And Maryland has a great journalism program, but they don't have a photojournalism program. So then I went up there, and I still could kind of have gone in another direction, but it just really fit, and I was really into it. And there were a bunch of folks in my class that really kept going with it. But I could tell like there was a group of us that were more serious about it, and others were going to end up going into something else. And so just kind of it developed. There wasn't one moment, but it just kind of kept building. And
I always think it's cool when high school students know what they want to do like in high school, and it doesn't take the college experimenting and taking different classes to figure out what, because most people decide what they want to do later in life. And the fact that I think I knew a little bit about English. I knew it was a passion of mine in high school, but that's pretty lucky to be able to figure that out so early.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a photojournalist. You want to be what? It's like if you're gonna do it, you got to go hard, because you can't kind of like halfway, because it's pretty competitive field. And so if you kind of decide that's what you're going to do, you definitely have to commit and go all in. And I do know there are a lot of folks that I studied photojournalism with that ended up going on to grad school for something else, or just kind of worked their way into other things. But there are a lot of ways you can go with it. You don't have to necessarily be a photographer. There are editors. I know one of my former colleagues as a student works as an archivist at Yale, I believe. And she just deals with the imagery and maintaining that. And so there's a lot of things you can do. But yeah, I don't think all students should necessarily commit to something so early. But if you know what you want to do, then go for it and
try it out.
And that's going to kind of maybe make you rise to the top on that.
Yeah, if you get excited about it so early on.
And now I joke that there's not much else that I'm too good at. So
there doesn't need to be.
I've really committed my life to this.
That's great. What was Syracuse?
I hope I'm okay at teaching, but
yeah, of course.
I'm getting there.
Well, it sounds like it.
Sorry to cut you off there, Jacob.
What was Syracuse going up there to that journalism program like for you?
It was great. The cold is certainly a major factor there, but once you get over that, and it does kind of bring everybody together. It's intense.
That's the first thing you think when you think of Syracuse.
So yesterday morning, real quickly, a little aside, I was coming to school, and Mr. Holly was out front checking students' RUVNAs to make sure they had filled out their COVID forms. And it was a little chilly, but I said, "Hey, Mr. Holly, how did you pull this cold duty this morning? And thanks for doing it." He said his daughter went to Syracuse, and he said, "Well, this is just Syracuse spring out here." And I said, "Yep, I do know that." So yeah, it's always kind of on the top of everybody's mind. And I remember going there and my mom giving me all these crazy warm clothes that half of which I didn't wear, because once you get to class, you're not going to sit there like you're going out to play in the snow. But once you get over it, you just kind of move along, and it's everyday life.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just kind of move along. But I do remember taking my pictures up there, and I was so proud of them. I thought I was really good at this, and I did my encounter project at Gilman with a Sun photographer, and spent a month with Lloyd Fox, who's still a photographer at the Sun, and got to go cover O's games and stuff like that. And my first picture ever published was in the Sun, and I thought I was really pretty good at this. And then my professor went through all my pictures, and he picked out one. He said, "This one's pretty good." And I was like, all right, I got a lot to learn. And then looking back, he was certainly right. But not that, I had a decent foundation on it. But yeah, I feel like it's you really have to hone it and really be on point with things to rise above, I guess.
So at that next level, when you're honing your photos and getting to the, I guess, upper echelon of photojournalism, what are those minor details that you need to adjust in order to make a photo great? Is it with the editing process, or is it just with your eye?
It's more the seeing part of it, I think, and just really being aware of your entire frame and the edges and your backgrounds and telling a story. This professor who kind of was infamous, he recently retired up there, David Sutherland, and he trained a lot of military photojournalists, because we had a program with the military where they would come through for a year. He would always say, "Boring," and it was just this, the content is really important too. So, what is going on in your picture? What is it important? Why would I care about this kind of thing? And, he was kind of rough about it and pretty straightforward. But, the emotion in your picture, the content, as well as the composition, and having clean pictures that draw people in and aren't distracting, and just really the details. So all those things that you learn in high school and all that if you take photography, but just taking it to that next level of consciousness of everything in the picture.
Is that the mark? Would you say that's, if you had to boil it down to one point, that's the mark of a truly great photo, is that it tells a story?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not always a complicated story. It can just be a real simple kind of story, a story that is incomplete, but it's kind of, to me, shedding some light on humanity. So it doesn't always have to be a big event that has kind of this worldly influence. It might just be a quiet moment or a personal moment, but you're shedding light on humanity, and just like writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you're shedding light on the human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could be taking photos at the largest event ever, and everyone's excited about it, but if it doesn't like evoke some conversation or thought or
and some of those things, I mean, it's always a sign of a great photographer if you can kind of break away from the pack and you're taking a chance, because it's safe to stay with the pack and make the picture everybody else is making. But if you can get out of the pack and kind of it's art, but there's a little competition to it, a friendly competition. You never, at least with all of my colleagues, we would never kind of sabotage anybody else, and you root for everybody, but it feels good if you were at an event where there were a handful of photographers and you look at what everybody did the next day in the publications, and you kind of managed to get something different that still tells the story, hopefully in an even stronger way. But yes, so often with those big events, you're kind of all in the same pack, and they make you stand in a certain spot, so it can be difficult. It's also very amazing how often you have all these different minds there, but we're all kind of trained the same way and think the same way. And then we independently go and edit, and we come up with the same moment was what we all thought was
interesting.
The crux of the situation there,
Yep.
So it's interesting to see that, and then also how when you do it or somebody else kind of breaks away, and you go, darn, why didn't I think of that? Or I did it this time.
Do you, when you freelance now, do you have certain people that you go to kind of review your photos and give you some pieces of advice, even though you're very accomplished and know a lot about photography already?
So it's tough. That's one thing that I really have liked about being back at Gilman, is kind of having, a little bit of a team, and Sarah Sachs, regarding teaching, I often kind of bounce things off of her, and what do you think of this? And it's something that I missed in those 20 years of freelancing, that there were times, I interact with photographers, guys I know, and I say guys, I use that to be non-gender specific folks that I know. And you see one another, but you don't know when you're going to see them again. And often it is a very kind of independent thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on staff and interning, I had editors, and in the old days it was less independent, because you'd come back and process your film and put your negatives on the light table, and you might have an editor come over and look at it with you, and sometimes they might select a picture and it might not even be the same one you liked, and you have to have this discussion, and I wouldn't say argument, but maybe a strong discussion about it. And now I shoot something, and I often have to sit in my car by myself and edit it and ship it off, and sometimes it's up on the internet before I even get home. And it is nice to have people to kind of bounce those things off, but nowadays it's not often specifically about this picture or this shoot. It might just be more broad things. When you have a chance, you're waiting around for things to happen, and you talk about the things that are not going so great or going great, and just photography more in general.
It's such a process, it sounds like. I mean, I don't really know anything about photography, but it sounds like it's such a thoughtful process. Has social media and the speed of like tweeting photos out or posting really quickly and that instant gratification, has that like tainted some of the art of photography, do you think?
To some degree. I mean, it also has democratized it. Like, now anybody can make pretty darn good pictures with their mobile phone, frankly.
Yeah.
Now it's more about the eye. I don't want my guys to hear this too much, because I make them use their cameras on manual, and there is a lot of purpose to that. That you kind of have to understand when you have these machines that automatically make these decisions, kind of how is that machine making these decisions, and it doesn't always make the best decision. So it's nice to be able to override it. But yeah, it's got pluses and minuses. I think maybe earlier in my career, I was all analog the whole time. I never once touched a digital camera all through college. I remember the newspaper in Syracuse, the downtown paper. I interned there for my whole senior year. It was awesome. Like, it was a paid internship. It was like my college job.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'd go shoot. And they got a digital camera, one of them, and it was really expensive and terrible. Had really low image quality and had a lag when you hit the shutter. as to when, but they bought it specifically to cover basketball games at night so they could get the pictures back and get them in the next day's paper. But they got it and they put it on the table, and one of the guys said, "Don't touch it, intern." And, I kind of enjoy the rough personalities that you often find at these publications, and some of it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it was like just this kind of new technology. And then when I went to interview for that job in Tennessee, I knew that they were all digital, and the Sun staff here in Baltimore, interestingly, it was the Jackson Sun and the Baltimore Sun. I think I might have been attracted to that too. A guy that was a photographer there let me borrow his digital camera, which is quite a nice thing to do for a night. And it works the same way as my first camera. I use it very similarly manually. And there are some times where I use some of the settings on it, but again, I kind of know why it's going to make these decisions. And I borrowed it just so that I knew when I went to this interview, they were going to give me one and tell me to go shoot something. I was like, I need to know what I'm doing with that. So I kind of came from the old world, but very quickly it changed. And I was, even then, I was like a little resistant to it, like kind of like these old grizzled veterans that I knew. And I was probably a little more malleable than they were. But, for some time, and as these things develop, aside from the cameras themselves, the outlets and Insta and all of that, I was a little bit resistant to it. But, you kind of give in and start to see what's great about these things, too. And I think the biggest thing is that it allows anybody to kind of create and then to publish it and share it with everybody.
And it probably makes it much more competitive, too, that, so many people can very easily, I think, use these cameras or phones or whatever it is to shoot and post their stuff.
Yeah. But we're seeing that in everything, to have an operation like this and to do video and good sound. I mean, you'd have to have like a professional studio, 15 years ago. And now, you can really do high quality things. We have some nice equipment here, but, it's not a special room and things like that.
Yep.
So, whatever field it is, often has kind of been opened up to others. There's not this barrier of finance and equipment and things like that.
Yeah. Everyone has a podcast now.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it lets those folks that maybe didn't have access to it have access. True. The good ones that really have something worth sharing. And then it lets kind of the folks that you wish didn't do it and share and maybe aren't bringing what you want to the world, whether it's just because of their content or that they just aren't very good at it. It allows them through too. And so it's really important to be a critical consumer of these things. And, I see that with students. Perhaps a few of them will go on and kind of make it their career, but the fact is most of them won't. But they'll be better at consuming these things and hopefully, more educated and, have a higher kind of bar for themselves of what they want to consume.
Well, develop their eye, their ability to see.
Yeah,
I feel like,
to have and taste is certainly in the eye of the beholder, but to have some sort of informed taste, I guess.
Yeah. Do you like working with the ninth graders? Is that a solid age for you, do you think? Or
I guess last year I did come on when Mrs. Sachs took her maternity leave just for, I think it was about 2.5 months, and I did have some older students. But, I don't know too much else. I had some freshmen. I had 3 classes, and I did have some juniors, and I think I had any seniors or juniors. But I guess I don't know any better. So.
But it must be cool from ground up teaching them.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's a clean slate, particularly with photography. And it was great last year kind of coming in, but I have noticed that, I didn't necessarily know exactly what they had learned. I did, to some degree. I went through what they learned and then spoke with Sarah, but I wasn't there for it. Now I was there firsthand and kind of know what to expect, and perhaps I was a little easy on it last year because I didn't. And it was really in the COVID winter for sure too. Not that this is too much different, but we've adapted, I guess. Yeah, there is an element to that. And, there's an element that drives you a little crazy, too, because we got to get these guys in upper school mode.
Yeah, that's true. I think the freshmen, for sure, have missed 2 crucial years of, middle school getting disciplined, getting, you know.
I've seen that with my own daughter. She's in 7th grade, and I think she's done pretty well. But there were these difficulties of her transition to middle school was through all this, and
Same with my sister. Yeah.
it's pretty tough. So it's not necessarily that. It's always tough. You know, it's a kind of, it's built in to be a big transition, and hey, this is something new. But now it's that much more of a difficult thing. So,
Yeah, socially, it's just they've taken such a hit from you know not being able to interact with each other as much, and everything being on the screen.
It's been great to have them here, and I think it's something they recognize too, and certainly all of us faculty appreciate it. It's you know, now we're kind of getting back into the hybrid thing a little bit, but.
Do you do the hybrid? Do you have kids zooming in?
I've had a few kids. You know, it's generally been 2 to 3. They're not sick, but maybe somebody in their family is, or you know, maybe they did test positive but are asymptomatic. So doing a little bit of that, but it's tough. But at least the majority of the class is right there, and I can look at what they're doing on the computer, and instead of just describing it, say, hey, why don't you go up there and click that, and then that'll let us do this, and just kind of be right there with them.
It's less clunky.
Yeah, and there's some kind of communication that happens that's nonverbal, just being in the same room, and just you know, it's hard to pinpoint, but a little feeling that you get and that you communicate. And I think your own excitement for the subject as a teacher is probably better communicated, and then you get a better read on your students too, just having them in the room.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I think also, I mean, I think it's for anyone, being on Zoom is so distracting. It's just very hard to sit there and look at your screen, and you have your phone there too. And
we know it's tough as adults to do it, and then we're expecting these younger folks to do it. Yeah,
for sure. But it's good to be back at school. We'll do the weekly Q-tip test if it means that we're here.
Yeah, I actually appreciate it. It's kind of like a monitoring service.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I actually, when I came on last year, really appreciated, like, I wasn't yet eligible to be vaccinated. I was like, cool. Now I could go get vaccinated because I'm an educator. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. What led your decision to come back to Gilman? Why'd you want to come back here?
So, you know, we were talking about knowing what you wanted to do early on, and aside from photography, the other thing that, you know, just as whimsical as my thoughts of photography was, it would be cool to be a teacher. And I think part of that is when you're a student, the people with whom you're most in contact are teachers, and they're your mentors and things like that. So it might be a natural kind of thing there. So when I was at Syracuse, I was going to minor in photography. In education. Okay. And I took one class that was, you know, more about theory and pedagogy and all that, and I didn't like it. And so I had this other class that I really liked with a great professor in cultural geography. So I switched out and went on to that. Several years later, just chatting with some folks I know still at school, they were like, oh, if I took that class, I would have switched out too. And it was just a class that a lot of people didn't like.
Gotcha.
Certainly coming back now, I wish I would have stuck with that a little bit, you know, but I'm winging it and doing okay, I think. But it was something I was always interested in, and I think a lot of folks enjoy kind of sharing their passions with younger folks. Then, interestingly, that first spring of COVID, when Gilman did their graduation, we did it one at a time every 10 minutes, and we were out on Harris Terrace, and families would arrive with their son and have their moment with Mr. Smythe and Mr. Hubeck, and I was there to photograph each one of them. So we did it over 4 days. So I got to know Mr. Smythe and Mr. Hubeck pretty darn well, and then when Mrs. Sachs took her leave, they were like, Ruark could come in, and, you know, he knows how to take pictures. I hope the conversation was a little more in depth than that, but probably not too far off. And so that's kind of what planted the seed there, and I'm really glad it did.
And Gilman's always been a special place for you, it sounds like.
I had some difficulties at times as a student. It wasn't always like perfect for me, and I imagine everybody is that way wherever they are, and as a student or as you know, your job. But by the time I, you know, was a senior here, I really was something I appreciated, and And then, yeah, I got to come back and do things with the teams. And I started working with the communications team and just coming in as a contractor a couple times a year. And I'd make pictures just of campus life, and I'd duck in and out of classes. And there are few teachers remaining that I had, but over those 10 or 15 years, I'd kind of pop into my old teacher's class and capture it and all. And it was definitely cool. It was a reason to do that. You can't just as an alumnus come in and say, I just want to kind of walk around and check things out. But so again, even in a familiar world, my camera was my license. But yeah, so I had been around at least a few times a year and then out for athletic events and things like that. So it wasn't, I wasn't a stranger. But there was a period kind of when you go to college and then you do your thing where, I don't know, 8, maybe 10 years where I hadn't been around very much. And then I started coming back. So.
What stands out to you in your memory from your time at Gilman, maybe in the vein that, like, what is similar or different from what you remember about Gilman to what it's like today?
Sure. Well, I do think it's pretty well documented and discussed, but I think I've heard you discuss it with some of your guests. Kind of the approach to the arts, certainly, and being in the art department. I felt like we got to do some cool things in the art world, but the dark room now we have is a dedicated art room. I think it was quite literally kind of a former janitor's closet, the closet that we used as a dark room back then, and it certainly didn't take as much precedence as part of daily life in the students.
So art wasn't as maybe celebrated back when you were here?
I don't want to say it wasn't. I mean, I think maybe I wasn't aware as a student, and I was in there and it was something that I chose to be a part of. But I think that a lot of students that maybe aren't inclined to do that are still involved. So, I know I have some students that maybe it's not their thing. They're not an art guy. And I really do try to not categorize like that, but there is a little bit of common sense, I guess. You go, this isn't, kind of his thing per se, but for one, it's really amazing when you see, hey, it kind of is their thing. That's part of them and their outlet as well. But I think that there are opportunities for, athletes, guys that are kind of more on that side of things, to say, hey, I've got this other side of me too that I want to explore and check out. So it's a little more open for everybody just to be part of it and explore that part of their internal workings.
Yeah, try it out, right? And I feel like ninth grade is the perfect time to take a photography class, see if you like it, see if anything sticks out to you, and if you continue to like it, then you take the advanced.
Exactly. And my last year in teaching some of those guys, and this year with my students, it's really amazing to see that some of these students that maybe they even felt like, I'm not one of those students, and they really end up enjoying it and having really great results. And so, yeah, it's part of, just like guys that aren't maybe the top athlete still experience sports. I would say that I'm one of those guys. I played Little League baseball and soccer and even a little travel, but I didn't get any further than I have a letter for fresh soft soccer, and that's kind of where it ended. But I still was an athlete. I got to get out there and participate.
Well, you've always been part of those athletic environments on the sideline.
And again, how it's kind of your ticket in. Even as a student, I started to realize that like, hey, I'm not going to be a varsity baseball player or even varsity soccer, or certainly not football. But and maybe my first 3 years in upper school, I wasn't the guy that even was out there going and at every game. But I started working for Cynosure, and so all of a sudden I was at a lot of these games and other events that I maybe would not have been at, and I really started to enjoy it and kind of find my place in this world, this small microcosm of the world here. And and I continued that through life. Funny, I haven't read it in 25, 30 years, whatever it is, but I wrote my college essay, and I'm kind of glad I haven't read it because it's probably not nearly as good as I remember it being. But it was about kind of seeing Gilman as a student and as a photographer, and I had this third way of seeing it. I worked 2 summers with the maintenance crew. That was my job.
Oh, wow.
With the outdoor maintenance guys, and so I'd be out painting lines, cleaning up trash, watering.
That's
the
cool.
gardens. Even I remember cleaning the leaves out of the window wells of the headmaster's house. So, and I wrote it about these 3 kind of approaches to
That's
Gilman.
a great idea.
And again, probably not as good as I remember it, but it was something that I was very aware of even back then.
Just the thought of having those 3 different lenses as a student, I don't think. I mean, some people probably think about that, but that's a really interesting essay topic.
Yeah, again. Awesome in my mind anyway.
Who were some of the teachers that you remember at Gilman as being super influential for you as just a young man growing up here?
Sure. So I mentioned briefly Mrs. Louise Miller, who she passed away some years ago. And she was my first photography teacher. She was actually knew her originally as Mrs. Pitt, and she married Mr. Ken Miller, who was also a middle school teacher. And then she moved to upper school and taught English, and she taught photography. And and she was really just photography was an interest of hers, and she was pretty good at it. But she wasn't like a professional photographer or anything. But she really started this whole thing off. And I did get to join the Millers for a lunch or breakfast one time at Towson Diner. I think it may have been right after I graduated from college. And I'm so thankful I got that opportunity because it was the last time I ever saw her. And I get a little emotional even thinking about it. Related to that, I saw Mrs. Trapp, who recently retired. I was covering the Hereford Bull Run cross-country meet, and Gilman was there. And that's when I got the news, and I think it was kind of old news that she passed away. And I got like this and had tears in my eyes, and I was like, I gotta cover this thing, and it just was like, caught me off guard. But so obviously, she had a strong influence on me.
That's awesome.
I'm in touch with my emotions.
That's great.
So she was definitely a big part of that. Now I'm drawing a blank. I even had in my mind there are a few teachers. Well, Eva Turner, certainly. I think that may have been the first class that I took, at one of the girls' schools.
Yeah.
So, that's like kind of an experience. I started here in 5th grade, so, you've been in school with boys, and now, like, especially at that age, you kind of have this self-consciousness about you, but you're also like, cool.
Was that sophomore, junior?
I think
Probably
it may have been junior year.
Yeah, junior.
I think, again, I'm still starting to get some of these details, but I think we do let the boys kind of have some of those opportunities a little earlier now. But then, like that, I think that was the first year you could do that. And it was cool because I just kind of developed this relationship with her, and she was super awesome, and I just liked her from the start. And then she came over to Gilman, and I'm sure she was helping everybody equally as a college counselor, but I kind of knew her a little better still. So I always like to think,
that's a big piece of advice she gave you in terms of where you could go.
My family, my mom did go on actually to get her master's degree, but she actually had me as a teenager. And like when I was a kid, I didn't know this, but she got her GED when I was in middle school. So, they're really smart people, and they're not like kind of backwards or anything. They don't want to paint that. But they didn't like have an experience of like they could say, hey, you want to check this college out? Like really relied on Gilman for this guidance. So, having her do that, like, very influential. I would have had no clue.
That's true. I think with a lot of parents who have kids just going to college, and the world, the environment, the competition is so different these days. And I see it with lacrosse a lot. Parents always need that, advice or just to be steered in the right direction in terms of where their son would fit for the next stage. So the fact that your counselor and Eva Turner helped you out with that.
Yeah, and my list of schools is like kind of, schools I had heard of and stuff. I don't think it was very guided.
Yeah.
And some of them were kind of small liberal arts schools. I remember going to visit Haverford, and I really liked it and had a great experience. But Eva Turner was kind of like, I think you don't need like a huge place, but you need something a little bigger, and this is a place that like has exactly what you want to study, and really is helpful. And it's still hard when you go to a place like that to break into these worlds. So, you almost need it to even have a chance. And a big element of it is just the people that you meet through it and the opportunities you have with it.
Mm-hmm.
We learn in the classroom, but here at Gilman, that's a big part. It just creates opportunities for you. And like you mentioned, you've got to be out there and do it at some point. There's only so long you can sit in a classroom and discuss it.
Right. So in the last couple minutes here, I'd like to get to.
Wow, have we gotten through an hour already? Wow.
Almost,
it's
yeah.
amazing. I think about, what am I going to talk about for an hour? Next thing you know.
I know. Well, you get talking about Gilman and teachers. It's, yeah,
I've
flies by.
never been accused of being short of words, though, I guess. So yeah, you mentioned to bring a book.
Now, were you a big English? Did you like English in high school?
I did like English, and I still kind of like. I think I'm. When I studied photojournalism at Syracuse, there was like a really big element of like news writing and stuff like that. And even on Wednesday, I worked at the State House for AP, and like you only get to write 2 sentences, but like they've got to be. You cannot be off. If I have a comma wrong when I call New York, and they say, "Yeah, we got him," but you're supposed to put a comma there, or you put a comma where you weren't supposed to. It's like so. It's really tight on those things, and you do have to be a good writer, and sometimes it's more difficult to write 2 sentences than when you can write several paragraphs about it. It's got to be really succinct. Places like the AP don't have a lot of room for kind of creative writing, but it's got to be strong writing and really to the point. So that is something that I've enjoyed. I don't get to exercise it as much, I don't do a lot of kind of long form writing, and perhaps I should. But I think even being here has given me an opportunity to kind of do a little more of that, even just in my interaction with students. And I probably give them longer comments than like I need to, but I just try to get it all out there for them. And I want to make sure it's well written, certainly.
Yeah, for sure.
But so, yeah, I did. I did enjoy English.
So what are you reading now?
So I just finished this the other day. I think it may have been the day before you asked me, and it was just a book that was on my Christmas list. I hold it up here.
Where tomorrow's?
It is not Ulysses, but it's.
Oh, that's Carmelo.
It's Carmelo Anthony's book.
Nice.
And it was co-written with D. Watkins, who's another Baltimore guy. I don't know. Imagine you probably know D. Watkins, but he was a drug dealer in Baltimore, and now he's like, in that world of academia and. Has gotten several degrees. And so he wrote it with Carmelo. I love Carmelo because he's a Baltimore guy, and he went up to Syracuse and won a basketball championship. It was after I was a student there. But
he was
I'm not
amazing.
A big jersey guy, but I do have an orange Melo jersey hanging in my basement. And I did get an opportunity years ago. He was filming a commercial for Nike in Baltimore, and I got an assignment from the Sun just to go down to the set and photograph him. And I don't know, some downtime, we just started chatting, and he was like, "Can I check out your camera?" And he's like, "I just got a new camera." And I think you may have mentioned it then, but I had forgotten it. But I read in this book how, he only spent 1 year at Syracuse, but he didn't declare a major, but he declared a minor, and it was photography. And he mentions that in the book.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
He doesn't talk about it a lot, but so that's kind of cool. This is not. It's just a 200-page kind of easy read, but it's a window into, kind of tough life in Baltimore, his overcoming it. I knew a lot about that, but there were some interesting things. I knew he went to Towson Catholic, and they're defunct now, so I can say a little bit about it. But he talked about a vice principal there who I don't believe he named, that he felt really kind of singled him out in a racist way, and I kind of thought he was kind of down with them, but he had a really bad experience there. And as an educator, that was relevant, and then just kind of my fanboyishness of it.
That's cool. I've seen that book around, so
it's fairly new. It just came out, and my family asked, "What do you want for Christmas?" I was like, "Oh, this book is pretty cool." And so yeah, and it's just an easy read.
Yeah,
it's a window into somebody's life, and that's what I generally enjoy reading. Memoirs and a lot of nonfiction, and again, just like with my photography, just like learning about people. I often like, and I read the newspaper a lot, and I still even get the print edition delivered several on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and otherwise I do the digital. I like reading the obituaries, and you always hope it's not somebody you know as you look back there. But you read about somebody's life and kind of what made them impactful, and why were they even featured in the obituary? Like why were they important enough?
Right.
And so I don't know if newspapers will be around at all by that time, but I always have this weird thing that I want my life to be important enough or to have had an impact enough that maybe I'll get an unpaid obituary. But it's just all about learning about people's lives and their experiences.
Yeah, I teach a character and literature class here, and we one of the assignments I had there's seniors in there, and one of the assignments I had them do was think about not an obituary, but like at the end of their life, how would they want people, close friends, even acquaintances, or people that are really important, family members, how would they want each of these individuals to think about them? And I think that's an interesting exercise.
It's your legacy, even if you're not religious, I think you could see it almost as your soul, like what you left behind. That's how I kind of see it. Like it's your soul, like how you live through others once you're gone.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the recommendation. I'm going to check that book out, but
it'll be an easy read, particularly for an English teacher. It's
I used to love Carmelo
and it's nice. Sometimes you meet people. I use the word fanboy, but I really had to guard against that, and I do get to kind of be in contact here and there with some pretty cool people, and I've never been super starstruck about it, but I've always appreciated the opportunity when you do interact with folks, and I never get autographs or anything, and it's just kind of this little thing you get to keep yourself of this experience. But sometimes that happens and you walk away a little disappointed, you know, and that was not the case with him. In fact, I was maybe even more impressed, like what he was talking about with photography. Like he knew what he was talking about. He had studied it some and done some work in it. So,
that's cool. Well, you have an overlap in interest, and I like that.
Yeah, and it was cool that I was able to say, hey, I went to Syracuse and grew up here, and I kind of had that connection, and then this further connection. So I still want him to get a ring, even though I don't like LA too much. I don't want, even if it's for the Lakers, I'll take it. I need Melo to get his ring.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
It's amazing
appreciate
how
it.
quickly this went by. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you.